Hi, I'm Clara Bennett. My sister once said I was just a footnote in her legacy. I still hear her voice from that gala, dripping with condescension as she claimed my algorithm was her brainchild. Then she pushed me and my son off a yacht. They called it an accident. But before I hit the water, I saw her smile. And hours later, they screamed because the one thing they didn't count on was me surviving, with every word, every frame recorded. Before we dive in, tell me, have you ever been betrayed by your own blood? What did you do? Drop a comment below. I read everyone. I was in the middle of prepping a pitch deck for our $5 million 0 cents funding round when the notification lit up my phone. I'd been up all night, haunted by the memory of Amelia sabotaging my first investor meeting by leaking my slides. I thought it would be another calendar reminder or maybe a message from Owen's school. Instead, it was from my sister. Amelia, family cruise last month. Bring Owen if you want. No hi Clara. No warmth, not even my name. Her coldness echoed the time she'd forgotten to credit me in a patent we co-developed. Just like that, 7 words, to crack open a door I hadn't tried touching in years. I stared at the screen for a long moment, the way you look at a street you used to live on but no longer recognize. We hadn't spoken in almost a year, not since I'd walked away from the Bennett Legacy boardroom and decided to engineer my own software startup from scratch. They said I betrayed the family. My sister said I was a fool. I said I was finally listening to myself. The message was blunt, like everything Amelia did when she wanted to feel generous while still holding the knife. I reread it 3 times. Each word stung, reminding me of the board meeting where she'd dismissed my ideas as redundant to applause. Bring Owen if you want. If I want. He's not a prop, he's my son. Still, I hesitated. Owen was 9 now, old enough to feel the coldness in the room when Grandma looked through him like fog on glass, but still young enough to believe that maybe, just maybe, this trip could mean something different. I wanted to protect him from Amelia's cruelty, like when she'd publicly praised my work only to whisper I'd never outshine her. When I picked him up from aftercare that evening, his hands were still sticky from the popsicle they'd handed out. The second I mentioned the cruise, his eyes widened. Wait, really? On a boat? With Auntie Amy? His excitement made something twist in my chest. He didn't know yet that people you love can look right through you and smile. I swallowed the urge to tell him how Amelia had once sold my wine recipe for $50,000, 0 cents, claiming it as her own. I nodded, forcing a calm I didn't feel. Yeah, Grandma invited us. Will there be dolphins? Maybe, I said, if we're lucky. That Friday, we boarded in Seattle. I made sure to keep expectations low for both of us. But when we arrived at the dock and saw the size of that yacht, sleek, modern, draped in silver and navy, I had to admit, it was stunning. Amelia stood on deck like a showroom model. Her white sundress clung just enough to show off the work she'd had done. She opened her arms with theatrical enthusiasm. "Owen," she gushed, "you've grown so much, look at you." She hugged him tight, then turned to me with a smile so practiced I could see the stitch lines. Her gaze lingered, a silent reminder of the time she'd erased my name from a company award. Hey, I replied, stiff as bone. Our mother appeared behind her. Evelyn had always been the one with the tighter smile and colder hugs. She embraced me for exactly 2 seconds, then pulled away with a hand on my elbow. "I'm glad you came," she said. "It's important to show unity now." Unity? I wondered who they were showing it to. Her diamond bracelet, my old design, glinted like a trophy of her superiority. On deck, a large printed welcome board leaned against the polished railing in bold gold script. "Welcome aboard," honoring the founders of Bennett Legacy, George Bennett and Amelia Bennett. I stared. No mention of the AI division I'd built from my garage. No Clara, not even a courtesy mention. The air smelled of citrus and salt. The omission burned, like when Amelia took credit for my algorithm at a tech conference. My throat tightened. Still, I smiled. I was good at that. We were ushered into the main lounge. White leather, teakwood floors, champagne flutes being passed by uniformed staff. It was a scene from a lifestyle magazine. If that lifestyle didn't include the taste of being forgotten, Amelia raised a glass. "To the future of Bennett legacy," she said loudly, "and to the people who actually built it." The room laughed. I lifted my glass with the others. The wine was sweet, familiar. It hit the back of my throat and sat there thick. I remembered when I first showed her the recipe years ago at my apartment, before she had veneers, and before she looked at me like a liability. She'd asked me to make it again and again, said it was the only wine that didn't give her headaches. Now it was being served back to me like a party trick she picked up in Spain. Someone near me whispered, "Best thing Amy ever came up with." I said nothing. Instead, I swallowed it all. The wine, the laugh, the eraser. Then I turned and looked at my son sitting on the couch beside Evelyn, smiling at something she said. He looked so open, so hopeful. I didn't want to ruin this for him, not yet, so I stood straighter, smiled wider, and tucked my bitterness behind my teeth like a secret I wasn't ready to share. As the sun sank into the water, casting the deck in amber light, Evelyn leaned in toward Owen and whispered something that made him look up. Her voice was soft, but I caught enough to freeze me in place. "This trip," she said, "will change everything." And I believed her, just not in the way she meant. Her words echoed Amelia's promise when she tricked me into signing over half my company shares for tax benefits. The next day unfolded under a sky too perfect to trust. The sun cast a glossy sheen over the yacht's polished railings, and the sea looked painted. Everything on board felt curated. My cabin was noticeably far from the others, tucked below deck near the engine hum, the kind of placement that says, "We didn't forget you, we just didn't want you too close." Breakfast wasn't announced to me directly. I only found out because Owen came running back from the main deck, cheeks flushed with excitement. "Mom, Aunt Amy says there's French toast and mango smoothies." I forced a smile. "Did she invite me too?" He blinked. "I think so. She just said, 'Come on up, kiddo.'" It was always like that. Invitations passed through my son as if I were an afterthought, even in the presence of the people who raised me. During the day I kept to the upper deck. I watched the ocean. I read half a novel. The staff, for all their polish, rarely spoke to me beyond necessity. Smiles with no teeth, nods that never made it to the eyes. Something was off. At nearly midnight, after tucking Owen into bed and checking my emails in the dim light of my cabin, a knock interrupted the hum of the boat. 3 sharp raps. I checked the time, 11:58 p.m. Outside stood Miles, one of the crew. He kept his eyes low. "Mr. Bennett requests your presence in the library. He says it's private." "Private? Of course." I pulled on a hoodie and followed the polished hallways to the library near the stern. The lights inside glowed warm. A single table lamp cast soft shadows across the mahogany shelves. My father sat alone. George Bennett looked every bit the man who had once chaired 3 boards simultaneously, composed, expensive, and entirely aware of his own power. "Clara," he said like it was a welcome, "come in, sit." On the desk lay a slim leather folder. A pen rested beside it, centered like it had been placed for ceremony. His calm demeanor mirrored the day he'd dismissed my concerns about Amelia's control, telling me to stop being dramatic. He gestured to the chair across from him. "I appreciate you taking the time," he began. "This won't take long." I didn't speak. I just sat. He opened the folder and slid a few pages toward me. "Just some housekeeping," he said. "A temporary transfer of company authority, purely for tax optimization. Legal prefers it this way for the quarter's end." I stared at the papers. My name was on them, but not as a co-signatory, just as the one relinquishing authority. My fingers brushed the edge of the paper. "And this reverts when?" "After the quarter. Standard procedure. All reversible." Why wasn't my lawyer looped in? He smiled again. "It's internal family. We don't want to raise unnecessary scrutiny." "Unnecessary for who?" That's when the door opened. Amelia entered, wearing a robe far too glamorous for midnight. Her surprise was clearly rehearsed. "Oh, I didn't know this was happening." "Now," she said, feigning sheepishness. "Dad, did you at least offer her tea?" She crossed the room, heels clicking softly, and leaned on the back of his chair. "Clara, don't overthink it. You know how quarterly stuff goes. This is all just paperwork, like flossing, necessary but boring." I looked at her. "Why the sudden urgency?" She tilted her head. "Because the company's evolving and we all need to be aligned. You're either on board or you're slowing us down." I stood. "I'll have my legal team review it when we're back in Seattle," I said. "Until then, nothing gets signed." My father didn't object, but I saw it. The flicker in his jaw, the tightening at the temple. "You've always complicated simple things," he said softly. And just like that, I was dismissed. The next morning, my room service tray never arrived. When I asked, the steward told me my request hadn't been received. At the pool, Owen was told he couldn't swim until further notice. New rules for safety. He looked confused and disappointed. I overheard 2 staff chatting near the bar. "They're phasing out the 3rd founder," one said, unaware I was around the corner. Quietly, "Less drama that way." 3rd founder? That was me at brunch. The atmosphere shimmered with a falseness that felt freshly applied. Amelia clinked her mimosa glass. 2 transitions, she said, smile wide. Evelyn sat beside her in a designer visor, slowly lifting her gaze from behind her sunglasses to meet mine. No words, just that half-smirk. Even Owen leaned closer to me and whispered, "Why does Auntie keep smiling at you like she's mad?" I placed my napkin down. "Because sometimes," I said quietly, "people smile the most when they're hiding something." That night, long after the boat had quieted and the lights on deck dimmed, I waited until Owen was asleep. Then I grabbed the small flashlight from my toiletry bag and slipped out of our cabin barefoot, stepped silent against the plush carpet. I needed answers, and I knew where they'd be. Not in the lounge, not in the wine-slick toasts, but below in the staff quarters. What I found made my skin crawl. The flashlight beam trembled in my hand, not from the sway of the boat, but from something colder, deeper, the kind of chill that starts in your spine and spreads. The hallway leading to the staff quarters was narrower than I remembered. My bare feet moved silently against the soft carpeting, past storage closets and laundry bins that smelled of starch and ocean air. I paused near the back galley. Someone was humming. I froze. Then she stepped into the light. Miss Clara. Hazel. The housekeeper I'd once helped during her son's medical crisis. I'd wired the $10,000 0 cents directly. No fanfare, just a mother to another. I never expected anything in return. She glanced around and lowered her voice. "They think you're asleep." "Not anymore," I whispered. She stepped closer, trembling. "I wasn't going to say anything, but I heard Miss Amelia. She said you'd be gone by Monday, that this whole cruise is meant to be a reset." My throat tightened. "A reset?" She nodded. She used the words, "peaceful reset," like you were just being quietly removed. "I don't think they expect you to come back from this trip the same, or come back at all." I gripped the flashlight tighter. Her warning confirmed the dread I'd felt since Amelia excluded me from a critical investor meeting, announcing my demotion in a press release. For a moment, I swore the floor tilted, but it wasn't the sea. It was the truth. Finally breaking loose, I thanked her with my eyes. She disappeared as fast as she came. I moved further into the crew area, pushing open a door marked Waste Recycling. Something had pulled me there. Intuition or fear? I don't know. On top of the bin was a crumpled document. Slightly coffee-stained but still legible, my breath caught. Investor deck. Q4 projections. Bennett Legacy AI. Author Amelia Bennett, CEO and founder. No mention of me. None. But every data point, every diagram, every line in the notes section, I had written those 2 weeks ago in my Seattle office, even the photos embedded. One of them was of Owen holding a model of a machine learning prototype we had helped fund. They stole everything. I felt like I'd been kicked. My vision blurred, but I couldn't afford to cry. Not here, not now. I rushed back to the guest cabins, moving through dark hallways as quickly and quietly as I could. Inside our suite, I went straight to my laptop. My fingers flew over the keyboard, trying to access our cloud drive, our internal server. Access denied. I tried my corporate email. Password rejected. Tried again. Locked out. Then I checked the notifications tab on my phone. Buried among shipping updates and marketing newsletters was an auto-forwarded press release I hadn't seen earlier that day. Bennett Legacy AI announces strategic restructure under sole visionary leadership of CEO Amelia Bennett. I couldn't breathe. They had already told the world I was gone, and I hadn't even left the boat. I slammed the laptop shut. The light on my phone dimmed. I didn't realize how hard I was clenching my jaw until I felt my molars ache. Then I heard it. Soft footsteps. Owen padded into the room in his Avengers pajamas, hair tousled from sleep. "Mommy," he whispered. "I had a bad dream." I opened my arms and he crawled in next to me, his small body radiating warmth and trust I suddenly felt I didn't deserve. "Tell me," I asked gently. He buried his face into my side. "I heard Aunt Amy downstairs earlier. She said, 'We don't need to come back.' She told someone we were old chapters." I closed my eyes. My silence had always been a way to keep peace, but now I realized it wasn't protecting him. It was inviting something in, something I should have shut out long ago. His words echoed Amelia's cruel dismissal at a family dinner, calling me an old chapter in front of Owen. He fell asleep with his hand on my heart. I didn't sleep. I got up just before dawn and began packing. I moved quietly, slipping clothes into our duffels, folding his books, his little drawing pad with scribbles of boats and spaceships. I zipped them all shut, knowing we had nowhere to go just yet, but we couldn't stay. We weren't guests anymore. We were problems to be handled. By the time the sun cracked across the horizon, I'd washed my face and dressed in silence. Owen still slept, breathing evenly. Then came the knock. Not the sharp cold one from the night before. This one was soft, sweet almost. It was Evelyn. She leaned in just enough to peer at me and smiled. "Would Owen like to come help me make cookies in the kitchen? He always loved sugar cookies, didn't he?" There was something about the way she said it. The smile didn't reach her eyes. The kitchen, off limits to guests, and the way she emphasized, "help me," like it was some invitation to safety. My stomach twisted. I looked back at Owen's sleeping face. Something was wrong. Very wrong. Evelyn's voice trailed off, but the unease she planted in me rooted fast. I followed her steps down the narrow hallway, my breath shallow, each one of her words repeating in my head like a low drumbeat. Cookies in the kitchen. Something about the tone she used. It wasn't warm. It wasn't grandmotherly. It was deliberate, sweet, but with something underneath, something calculated. When I stepped into the galley kitchen, it looked like a scene out of a catalog. White marble counters, copper pans gleaming on the racks, and Evelyn, immaculate in a lavender blouse and pearl studs, carefully rolling dough like she'd done it 1,000 times. Owen stood on a step stool, face bright with pride, his hands smudged with flour and sugar. "We made orange blossom sugar cookies," Evelyn chirped, holding up a tray. Beside it were 2 steaming mugs. I barely noticed the cookies. My eyes went straight to the cups. Hot cocoa. She smiled. "Just a little something special." As if on cue, Owen reached for one. I crossed the room, my steps faster than I meant them to be, and caught the handle just as it brushed his lips. He looked up, confused. "It smells weird," he mumbled. "Kind of bitter." I dipped a finger into the drink and tasted it. Not cocoa, not just cocoa. It was bitter. Sharp orange zest. Yes, but something else. Something that made my tongue go numb at the edges. "What's in this?" I asked, holding the cup up. Evelyn gave the faintest shrug, wiping her hands delicately on a dish towel. "Cocoa, cinnamon, a splash of orange essence, the kind your grandfather used to love. Don't be so jumpy, Clara. It's not always about you." There was that tone, the same one Amelia used when she smiled too wide or clinked her glass just a beat too loud. I held Owen's hand tightly and walked out. No thank you. No backward glance. Back in our cabin, I sat him down with a drawing pad and turned on a cartoon low enough not to draw attention. Then I reached for my phone. I needed to speak to my lawyer. I dialed his secure line. The call connected for a split second, then glitched, screen flickering between frames before freezing, but not before I saw something in the background. It was a still frame of Amelia in my Seattle office. Not a meeting room, my office. Behind her, barely in focus, was a man I didn't recognize. Balding navy blazer holding my laptop. The frame froze and I saw it again. My framed picture with Owen on my desk in her shot. I ended the call and stood there, shaking. How long had she been inside my space? I grabbed my tablet, tried logging into our company server again. Access denied. Tried the VPN. Blocked. Email. No. Even the alternate Gmail I used for backups gave an error. I checked the yacht's Wi-Fi panel. Most domains were blocked. VPNs, encrypted messengers, even Dropbox. And then I saw it. GPS scrambling software running in the background of the network console. They weren't just limiting me. They had built a cage, a beautiful, floating, sun-drenched prison. I felt my body tremble, not with fear, but with clarity. They hadn't invited me back to heal the family. They invited me to erase me with a smile. I turned to Owen, who was coloring in a spaceship with his tongue sticking out in focus. "Baby," I said, kneeling beside him. "From now on, I want you to stay near me, okay? Don't go off with anyone. Not Grandma, not Aunt Amelia, not even for cookies." He looked up, puzzled. "Why?" "Because sometimes people pretend to be sweet when they're not, and Mommy needs to keep you safe," he nodded slowly. "Like that show with the fox that wore glasses." "Yes," I whispered, "exactly like that." When he went to the bathroom, I opened the small black pouch buried deep at the bottom of my suitcase. It had a tiny waterproof tracker, 2 burner phones, and a list of emergency contacts I hadn't looked at in years. I slipped one tracker into Owen's sneaker, the left one, just beneath the sole. He wouldn't notice it, but I would. The other I pressed into the lining of my bra. I was done waiting for the next move. That evening, dinner was served on the upper deck under a canopy of lanterns. Amelia toasted again. Of course she did, this time to milestones met and transitions honored. No one looked at me except Owen, who reached under the table to hold my hand. After dinner, we returned to the cabin. I double-checked the lock, secured the sliding balcony door, laid out tomorrow's clothes, set 2 alarms. Then a soft knock came at the door. George. He stood with his usual poise, navy pullover, khakis, not a hair out of place. Breakfast tomorrow. "Just us," he said. "On deck, one last family meal before we dock." He smiled like it was fatherly, but there was something final in his voice, something heavy, something rehearsed. I nodded, but didn't answer. He left without waiting for a response. When I closed the door behind him, I leaned against it. They weren't done. They were just beginning. I didn't close my eyes once that night. Every time I blinked too long, I imagined Owen's face underwater, his hands reaching, the calm way George had said it. One last family meal rang in my head like a funeral bell that hadn't finished tolling. I packed silently, methodically, with one eye always on the door. IDs, emergency cash, the waterproof GPS beacon I kept for offshore trips. I slipped the GoPro from Owen's toy drawer into my jacket. Not to record memories, to capture proof. Owen stirred when I slipped the small life vest under his clothes. "Is it going to rain, Mommy?" He mumbled, eyes still sticky with sleep. Maybe, I whispered. Better safe than sorry. He didn't ask more, just nodded, trusting me, like kids always do before the world teaches them not to. By the time the sky shifted from indigo to pale gold, we were both dressed, calm on the outside, packed on the inside. I adjusted the button on my blouse, checked my phone, still no signal, and held his hand as we made our way to the deck. The scene was beautiful, deliberately so. Silverware glinted against crisp white linen. A crystal carafe of orange juice caught the sun like amber glass. Sliced melon, croissants, and a bowl of hand-cut strawberries, red as wounds, were laid out like a magazine spread. Amelia wore white, again, always white, her hair curled in lazy camera-ready waves. She looked like she was hosting a brunch for a charity gala, not orchestrating a finale. Evelyn poured juice with a serene expression. George stood with his hands behind his back, the ocean wind tugging gently at his cuffs, like even nature wanted him exposed. "Good morning," he said, with a warmth so artificial I felt a chill. We took our seats. I placed Owen between me and the railing. "I thought you'd appreciate the sunrise," George said, gesturing to the horizon. "Symbolism and all." I peeled an orange for Owen slowly, my fingers deliberate. I hadn't touched a thing else on the table. Amelia raised her glass. "2 transitions," she said for the 3rd time in 3 days. "To family," George added. "To peace," Evelyn said with a smile I didn't trust. Then George pointed suddenly. "Look! Dolphins!" Everyone turned their heads toward the horizon. I didn't. There were no dolphins. I knew that. But Owen, bless him, stood on his tiptoes, squinting. Evelyn stepped behind us. "You can't see from here," she murmured gently, her hand brushing my shoulder. "Come closer." Owen tugged my sleeve. "I want to see Mommy." I smiled down at him, heart pounding. "Let's stay right here." But George had already stepped forward toward the railing. Amelia, too. "Just a few more steps," Evelyn said. "This is the best spot." She took Owen's hand. Something inside me broke open. The polite shell, the reflex to keep the peace, shattered. "No," I said louder than I meant. "He stays with me." They all looked back at once, and then, before I could react, something slammed into my back. The world tilted. I reached for Owen, got his jacket, his collar, anything. His feet lifted from the deck. We were weightless, and then impact. Salt filled my nose, my mouth, my ears. The cold was a slap, a punch, a scream. Owen kicked. I wrapped my arms around him and kicked hard upward. We broke the surface, coughing, spitting, clinging. A life ring floated nearby, drifting from the stern. Whether it had been thrown or dislodged, I didn't care. I shoved him onto it, arms numb but moving. "Hold on," I rasped. "Don't let go." He nodded, teeth chattering. I looked back. The yacht, it was pulling away. No one was shouting, no alarm sounded. No one leaned over the edge with panic or confusion or even curiosity. They were walking back toward the table, toward the juice and the fruit and the cutlery, as if nothing had happened. Amelia laughed. I could hear it across the water, light, crisp, like a toast at a wedding. My muscles screamed. My jacket dragged. I gripped the edge of the life ring and kept Owen's face above the surface. He was pale, blinking rapidly. "Mommy, are we going to die?" "No," I said. "Not today." He didn't ask more. The yacht grew smaller, just another glimmer on the vast blue, and still, no rescue, no turning back. As I treaded water, I tilted my head back toward the sky. "They think I'm gone," I whispered through chattering teeth, and then quieter still. Let them. The waves rocked us like a cruel lullaby, steady and indifferent. Owen's small fingers had gone quiet in mine. I adjusted his weight on the life ring, keeping him as dry as I could while I floated beside him. One arm looped through the rope. The sun crept higher, its warmth sharp on my salt-soaked skin. My shoulders ached, my lips had cracked, but I whispered to him gently as if we were home, tucked in bed. "You're safe, sweetheart. We're just waiting now. Someone's coming." He nodded, eyes half closed. "Will they bring pancakes?" I smiled despite the sting behind my eyes. "They might." Then, faint but rising, a sound. A rhythmic chop, low and constant. I turned my head toward the sky. A dark dot against the morning blue, growing. The GPS beacon had done its job. The helicopter hovered above like a mechanical guardian. Wind whipped the surface of the water into a shimmer. A diver dropped into the ocean. Quick, precise. His arms were around Owen before I even had time to fully exhale. "Got you, buddy," the man said, strapping Owen into a flotation harness. "You're doing amazing." He looked over at me. "Ma'am, we'll lift him first, then come back for you." I nodded, teeth clenched to keep them from chattering. The basket rose. Owen disappeared toward safety, his face tilted downward until the last moment. When the diver returned for me, I didn't speak. I just climbed in, one shaking hand still gripping the GoPro around my neck. At the hospital, everything smelled like antiseptic and lemon polish. Owen was wrapped in warm blankets, already fast asleep on the cot beside me. I sat upright, Ivy in my arm, my hands still shaking, more from what lay ahead than what we'd escaped. The nurse asked if I needed to call anyone. I just smiled. Already handled. The moment she left, I connected to the hospital Wi-Fi. The GoPro synced automatically, footage uploaded in the background. I opened my private cloud and created a folder titled Truth. No caption, no context. I trimmed a 37-second clip, clear, time-stamped. Zoomed on George's open arms, and Evelyn's silent posture, the laughter in the background, the splash, Owen's scream. I sent it to one contact, a journalist I trusted from a tech equity project 3 years ago, just the clip. Within minutes, my phone buzzed. An alert. Private video viewed 12 times. Then 34. Then 96. Still, I said nothing. Later, while Owen napped, I opened my old Gmail account. One I hadn't touched in years. There it was. A triggered backup. A message I'd built into my failsafe system, scheduled to send if I hadn't logged into my main business platform within 48 hours. Subject: if you're reading this, something went wrong. Recipients: my lawyer, my compliance officer, 2 board members I trusted. The email contained company access logs, versions of my investor presentations, full metadata, and video timestamps from our yacht trip, including screenshots of Amelia's altered slides. It was already moving through the pipeline. My silence had activated something more powerful than any confrontation. Evidence. Scheduled steps. Legal pre-authorization. I hadn't realized I'd done that. Not really, but I had. Somewhere in the back of my mind, I must have always known. The room darkened. A nurse drew the curtain. I sat there in the dim, listening to Owen's soft breathing. And then, at 7:44 p.m., my phone vibrated again. It was a screenshot sent by an unknown number. It showed my family. Amelia, George, Evelyn, stepping off a private jet. Seattle runway, smiles wide, champagne in hand. The caption beneath: "They made it home. Thought you were still gone." They're celebrating. My stomach clenched, but my face stayed still because the celebration had begun, just not the one they expected. The photo sat on my screen like a dare. Amelia, legs crossed, toasting something unseen. Evelyn with that brittle smile. George grinning like a man who thought he'd finally won. They stood in my Seattle home, celebrating my erasure. My obituary hadn't hit the papers, but they were already dancing on my grave. I stared at the image for a long time. Then I picked up the phone. Officer Lucas, the same man who had pulled Owen from the sea, was already coordinating with my lawyer. He didn't need convincing. The GoPro footage was enough. The system was slow, but when it moved with weight. We had 6 hours. That's all I needed. The sun had barely set when I entered the living room, the same one where Amelia once stood in designer heels, giving a rehearsed monologue about legacy for her followers. The couch was still in place, the plant still fake, the frame of our perfect family still staged above the mantel. I sat exactly where she had. Owen clutched the Coast Guard badge to his chest. He'd been quiet ever since the hospital, but now, watching me zip up the pouch holding the original investor slides, he finally spoke. "They think we're still gone." I nodded. "Let them think that a little longer." He sat beside me and tucked his legs under the throw blanket. "I want to be the one to open the door." I smiled, though the moment felt anything but light. "Then you better be ready." At 2:09 a.m., headlights flared outside. They were earlier than expected. Through the slats of the blinds, I saw George step out first. A driver took their luggage. Amelia adjusted her coat, hair pinned in waves. Evelyn's heels clicked against the stone path. The door handle turned. Laughter echoed. "Wine or bourbon?" George's voice. Casual. Victorious. The foyer light flicked on. Evelyn screamed. Amelia froze. George dropped the keys. I didn't move. I just looked at them. Not with anger. Not with fear. With presence. Alive. Whole. Unshakable. "You're dead," Evelyn whispered, backing against the wall. Amelia's mouth moved, but no sound came. No. This isn't possible." George's hands trembled. "You weren't supposed to survive." I stood slowly. I did. Silence. Then Owen rose beside me, his voice small but steady. "You tried to kill my mom." George opened his mouth, closed it again. Then a new voice cut in. Firm, clear, male. George Bennett. Evelyn Bennett. Amelia Bennett. "You are under arrest for attempted murder, conspiracy to commit corporate fraud, and endangerment of a minor." From behind the archway, 2 detectives stepped into the room. Their presence didn't need volume. It had certainty, finality. They had already briefed the judge. They had the footage. They had the Coast Guard logs. They had the auto-triggered email logs. The case was airtight. As the cuffs clicked around Amelia's wrists, she twisted violently, shouting, "You were always in the way from the day you were born!" Her voice cracked. Evelyn hissed, "We gave you everything." I stepped forward, calm, precise. "You tried to take everything, including my son." They didn't respond. They couldn't. The front door opened again. Flashing lights strobed across the front of the house as the squad car waited. Owen looked up at me. "Are they going to jail forever?" I knelt to meet his eyes. "Maybe not forever," I said, "but long enough for us to breathe again." The car pulled away, and with it, decades of silence I hadn't realized I'd carried in my chest. We stood in the doorway, just the 2 of us. No noise, no more shadows. Just a little boy with a badge and a mother who had learned how to turn pain into power. Later that night, while Owen slept curled up with a pillow too big for his frame, I opened my inbox to check on legal filings. A new message blinked at the top. Subject: "For your eyes only" attached. A scanned image. A single page, handwritten, familiar script, my father's, sent from the infirmary of the county jail. The inbox pinged at 6:32 a.m. Owen was still asleep, curled into the curve of my arm. I didn't want to move, but the subject line tugged at me. Scanned letter, George Bennett. I sat up slowly, heart steady but stomach tight. I clicked. The image loaded slowly, ink uneven as if the pen had slipped or the hand had trembled. It wasn't long, just 5 sentences, maybe 6. I was wrong. I let fear and greed rewrite our family. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know I was always proud of you, and I hated it. That was it. There were no explanations, no promises to change, no requests for mercy. just the bones of a truth he'd never said aloud, dried out, almost too late to matter. I didn't cry. I shut the laptop. By 10:00 a.m., my lawyer had confirmed the next hearing was moving forward, a preliminary live stream session to determine bail's status. Amelia had managed to orchestrate a press conference beforehand from a secured Zoom link inside the jail. We watched from the firm's conference room in silence. She looked polished, even radiant in a pale blazer and a minimal gold chain. Her eyes scanned the virtual press pool as if this were a product launch. "My sister is struggling," she said with a soft, practiced voice. "You all saw how emotional things became on the yacht. She's clearly not well. The footage that's circulating is misleading. Here, let me show you something." Her team cut to a video. Low contrast, refiltered, shaky footage showing me raising my voice at George, me gesturing sharply. A distorted audio overlay made it sound like I was threatening him. I begged him. The recording of me said, chopped and edited, to give me what's mine or I'd ruin him. A few gasps came through the speakers. My jaw clenched, but I stayed still. She manufactured drama to gain sympathy. Amelia said she's manipulating a narrative because she lost control of the company. The live-streamed comments lit up. Some in support, others skeptical. The press, ever hungry, fed both wolves, until my attorney leaned toward the mic. "We'd like to present rebuttal evidence, Your Honor, a recording from a GoPro recovered during the rescue." The judge nodded. "We played 37 seconds, full audio, multiple camera angles, no edits." Amelia's voice in a hushed rush. "Say the lines, or we cut her off, you know the deal." George, quieter. She'll never survive this. Then the moment, the railing, the push, my scream. "Owens." No one spoke. Not the judge, not the reporters, not even Amelia. I didn't add commentary. I didn't explain. The footage did the work. When the video ended, the judge cleared her throat. "Let the record reflect that new evidence has been entered. Full review pending." We logged off, but the internet didn't. By evening, every network had picked up the clip. Online forums lit up. Side-by-side comparisons of Amelia's doctored version and the GoPro truth were all over social media. Within hours, 2 sponsors pulled her name from their brand endorsements. She was still in custody, but her empire began to crack from the outside in. At the courthouse the next day, I walked past her holding cell. She wore another white suit, tailored and stark. But what caught my eye wasn't the outfit. It was the handkerchief, folded neatly into her front pocket, white lace trimmed and embroidered in cursive blue. Clara. My hand moved before I even realized. As I passed, I reached forward and pulled it free. Her eyes widened, her body froze. "You tried to erase me," I said low and clear, "while wearing my name on your heart." It wasn't about fabric. It was about what they'd always done. Take my work, my words, even my name, and pretend it had always been theirs. The thread unraveled. Amelia let out a scream, raw, primal. She lunged at the bars, shrieking things that made the officers pause mid-step. "You ungrateful little—" "She stole everything," she cried. "That child was never—" They pulled her back before she could finish. I didn't turn. Outside cameras waited. I didn't pose. I didn't wave. I walked straight through the doors. Owen's small hand tight in mine. The press wanted a statement. I gave them the only one that mattered. I'm not here to destroy anyone. I'm here to live. That's all I ever wanted. Back at home, we turned off the news. We didn't need the updates. They would come whether we wanted them or not. That night, Owen and I took 2 folding chairs and sat under the oak tree in the park 3 blocks from our apartment. The air smelled like fresh grass and someone's barbecue from down the street. He laughed, really laughed for the first time in weeks. It bubbled out of him, light and reckless, like childhood should be. But as I looked at him, something in his eyes held me still. Behind the laughter was a shadow, something that hadn't quite lifted. The wind rustled the leaves above us, soft like breath against skin. Owen's laughter still echoed, but it was quieter now, more spaced out. His legs dangled from the park bench as he kicked at invisible things in the air. I watched him, not with worry, not anymore, but with something gentler, like reverence. He had seen more than any child should, and somehow he hadn't crumbled. He just learned to bend with the storm. That night under the oaks marked the start of a different season. It had been a year. The trial ended in full conviction: attempted murder, conspiracy, corporate fraud. Amelia received 22 years without parole. Evelyn was handed 20. George died 3 months into his sentence. A pulmonary embolism. Sudden, quiet, almost too easy for the man who had nearly let his daughter drown. Owen and I moved to Portland. Not too far, not too close. A place where we could be anonymous, and then, if we chose, visible again. I launched New Horizons, a mentorship program for people like me. Those discarded by blood, erased by lineage, overlooked by their own flesh and blood. We helped rebuild resumes, restart careers, rewrite self-worth. I never wanted revenge. I just didn't want silence to win. At our first exhibit, themed Restorations, I placed a small glass frame on a white pedestal. Inside it, pressed and preserved, the handkerchief Clara, stitched in soft blue, a name that had once been hidden in a drawer, tucked in a stranger's pocket, tossed across a courtroom. Now it sat center stage. Below it, a bronze plaque read, "We are not what they called us. We are who we decide to become." People paused. Some nodded. Some cried. One woman whispered, "I needed that." Later that night, while I was locking up the gallery, a woman with silver hair and eyes like mine stepped out from the shadow of a pillar. She handed me an envelope worn at the corners. "Your father asked my husband to mail this. He passed last month. I found it cleaning out the drawer." I nodded, numb. Inside was a folded sheet of paper and something else. A crumpled drawing yellowed from time. Stick figures. A lopsided house. One small figure labeled me forgotten. My handwriting, age 8. I remembered drawing it. I remembered my mother throwing it away. But on the back, written in a hand I hadn't seen since the letter from prison, "I never should have let them forget you." I didn't cry, but I let go. And that was everything. The company we built, what was left of it, survived. Not because of brand power or the PR machine that once spun lies into legend. It lived because we rebuilt it on different values: transparency, safety, voice. Hazel, the housekeeper who had warned me that night on the yacht, was now on the board. Her vote carried the same weight as mine. Owen helped name the AI assistant in our new research lab. He called it Truth. And maybe that was the final word we needed. One evening, we were walking home from his chess club. The air smelled like fried chicken and pine mulch. He was humming something under his breath when he suddenly looked up. "Mom?" "Yeah. Will we ever see them again?" I didn't lie. "I hope not," I said. "But if we do, we won't need to hide." He thought about that for a second. Then he smiled. Now he ran to feed the cat. I paused in the hallway, fingertips brushing the edge of that handkerchief frame on the wall. Once I would have looked at it and remembered pain. Now it felt more like armor. Some families raise you to be strong. Some raise you to be silent. But the most powerful thing I ever did was stop asking to be seen and start living like I already was.